Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. These words by Carl Jung really struck a note from the very first time I heard them because they bring together something that I'm really passionate about, and that is creating a life you love. I'm Denise Sahandev, and I'm a personal growth mentor with a particular fascination between the mind body connection. And that's why I decided to talk to you today about something that I find so important when it comes to creating a life that you love. And this is know yourself, know who you are. So today's talk is going to focus on neuroplasticity and breath and how those can become tools of transformation. So most of us have heard the word neuroplasticity, and I'm pretty sure we all know what breath is. But what happens when we start to become curious about the role neuroplasticity and breath can play in our lives? So let's start with something familiar, breath. The very first thing we do when we come into this world is we take a breath. And the very last thing we do when we leave is we give it back. And in between that entire journey, we are breathing. Now, breathing is part of the autonomic nervous system, which means we don't need to do anything in order to breathe. As I'm standing here speaking to you, I'm not saying inhale, exhale, and I really hope you're not doing the same on the other side. Similarly, I'm not telling my heart to beat. I'm not telling my digestive system to digest the breakfast that I just had. It just happens all on its own. But what happens if I decide to take that unconscious physiological action and make it conscious? So, for example, in preparation for talking to you today, I've been using long, slow, deep breathing. When I breathe slowly and deeply, it slows down my heart rate. It communicates to my nervous system that I'm safe, and then I'm able to speak to you without my head becoming all cloudy, remembering the important things that I want to share with you. In contrast, if I was breathing short, shallow breaths, I would find it difficult to speak. My mind would get all confused and I wouldn't be able to relay the messages that I have to give to you today. So we can see the direct impact that the breath has on the physiology. Similarly, we can access the unconscious mind in the same way that we can access the unconscious physiological functions. Why is this even important in terms of neuroplasticity, you might ask? And the reason for this is that the body, particularly the breath, can create a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. When we start to breathe consciously, we're creating a little message that says, okay, maybe, just maybe, I can access and impact my unconscious mind in the same way that I can access and impact my autonomic nervous system. So this is all very interesting, but how does it connect to neuroplasticity? And I guess, what is neuroplasticity in the first instance? It's one of those words that we kind of hear and we've got a vague sense of what it means. And I'm going to share with you today the simplest understanding that I have of neuroplasticity, because this is what really helped me understand how it works and how I can use it to make lasting change in my life. So let's start at the beginning. From birth until more or less the age of 7, children are largely in what we call a theta state. So the theta state is in fact the hypnotic state. And when we are in a hypnotic state, it means that we are suggestible. I don't know, perhaps you've been to one of those hypnotherapy shows where a very fancy hypnotist will get a member of the audience onto the stage and have them clucking like chickens or forgetting that the number 7 exists and thinking they've got 11 fingers or some such thing. Now, we are tapping into that same part of the brain in childhood, but it's happening unconsciously. So what this means is that it's really easy to teach a 6-year-old to read, but it's really difficult to teach a 30-year-old to read because they are no longer in that theta state, the suggestible state, the learning state. So that's great because it means we can teach children how to function in the world, what's safe, what's unsafe, how to read, how to think, and that's all really great. Unfortunately, they don't only take the suggestions that we want them to take, but they also begin to absorb the suggestions that we are unconsciously sharing with them. The main influence in a child's life are their primary caregivers. So, if I can share an example from my own life, I grew up in an environment where 2 words were really, really common. And those 2 words were life's tough. So it might be that I would bump my toe and I would hear, life's tough, my girl. Or perhaps somebody passed and I would hear, life's tough, my girl. So I created very early on a very deeply imprinted neural pathway for life's tough. And again, I might find you sitting here thinking, well, so what? What difference does this make? You're an adult now. You know that's not true. But unfortunately, those neural pathways are acting subconsciously. So the way this works is that the brain has filters on it. So let's say there was an artist in the room. And I said to that artist, okay, turn your back to this room and I'm going to describe it and you draw it. We would then ask that same artist to draw the room as you described it. And we would end up with 2 completely different images because I'm looking at the room through my filters and you are looking at the room through your filters. So these filters determine what we see and what we don't see. I know we've all had an experience like this. I remember just recently one of my clients said, like when you're pregnant and all you see are pregnant people, because that filter is open for pregnancy, it's front of mind. I love to use this example because I know many people have had this experience too. Let's say you decide to buy a new car and you decide, I'm going to buy a red Ferrari. You do so much research. You find out everything you can about red Ferraris. You speak to people who have owned or do own red Ferraris. One day, you get into your old car and you drive over to the dealership. When you get there, you get into this beautiful red Ferrari, you feel the leather steering, you take it for a test drive, you know what the engine sounds like, you know what it feels like as it roars underneath you. And you get back to the dealership after your test drive and you say, right, order me this car, I'm doing it. You go home. A few weeks later, you get a call from the dealership to say, right, your red Ferrari is ready for you. You get into your old car, you take the same route to the dealership as you did previously, but this time you notice that everywhere you look, you see red Ferraris. Now, it's not that those red Ferraris weren't there the first time you took that journey. It's simply that you didn't have a neural pathway for them. So you didn't see them. You didn't notice the cars because your neural pathway didn't exist, but now it does. You've created a neural pathway for red Ferraris, so your filters open and they let it in. Now, you can imagine if you've got a neural pathway like I do for life's tough, how that works. So my filters open, and coming into my awareness is evidence supporting life's tough. So every time something difficult happens, those filters open and they say, you see, Denise, look how difficult life is. Do you see how tough life is? You need to be careful. But then perhaps something effortless will happen. And it's kind of like a flash through my awareness that I barely even notice. Now, again, you might think, well, so what? What difference does that make to your life? Well, it makes a huge difference. Because let's say somebody presents me with an opportunity, and this opportunity is effortless. There's a possibility that I won't even notice. It'll go right over my head. I won't even hear it. Or if I do hear it and I do consider it, I'll constantly be drawn away from it because there's no such thing as easy. Life should be difficult. I should have to work hard for the opportunities. So I'm missing out on a whole lot of opportunities because I don't have a neural pathway for life is really good to me. Life is effortless. So I don't see these opportunities and I don't take them when they arrive. Now, I'd like to share a case study with you to show you the impact that neural pathways can have on your life when they're unconscious and how we can undo them and create new neural pathways. I was working with a client some time ago, and one of her problems was in relationships. She found it really difficult to be with somebody who ticked all the boxes. So she had this long list of things that she wanted. Not, and this is not things that we don't all want. She wanted to be respected. She wanted somebody who was compassionate. She wanted somebody to love her, who was kind to her, who supported her. Not a big ask. Anyway, while we were working together, she met somebody and he ticked all the boxes. She really was enjoying his company. And 2 or 3 weeks into the relationship, we met up and she said, I'm so bored with this guy. I don't really know if he's the one for me. Yes, he's really nice and on paper he ticks all the boxes, but there isn't that, that spark. And we went back into her history, and this was a regular pattern with her. It's not that the kind of guy that she wanted wasn't attracted to her, or that she wasn't meeting them or going into relationships with them. But it seemed that every time she met somebody that fitted the criteria that she was looking for, she would somehow self sabotage. So we did a little bit of digging. We became curious. And it turns out that she grew up in an environment where her father was verbally abusive to her mother. He didn't respect her, he didn't speak nicely to her, their relationship was very volatile. Her parents would often separate and then get back together again. There was a lot of uncertainty. She never quite knew where she stood. And on reflection, she realized that she was often afraid of what was going to happen. If dad left, would we be financially secure? How was mom going to cope? Mom always got upset when he was gone. And then I felt uncomfortable. And when we discovered this link, what we realized is that her brain was doing exactly what it's meant to do, which is seek out the familiar because the familiar is safe. Her neural pathway that she had created during her childhood is that relationships are unreliable. Now, this is really important information for her. Because every time she went into a relationship with somebody reliable that ticked the boxes, it would be an alert. The alarm bells would go off, and her brain, her mind, her beliefs would become really, really worried. We are in a dangerous situation because this is a reliable person in a reliable relationship, and that's not safe for you. We've got to go back. And this is how she would subconsciously sabotage the relationships. So once we understood that this is what was sabotaging her relationships, the first thing we were able to do was to move her relationship to herself from one of judgment. Why do I always mess up these relationships? Why do I keep choosing people that are not in alignment with what I consciously want? From that judgment to compassion. Of course, I'm sabotaging these relationships. It makes so much sense that I would sabotage these relationships when I understand where it's coming from. Once we know what the subconscious belief is, in her case, relationships are unreliable, then we're able to work with those beliefs. So, from my perspective, I use a technique from NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming, called timeline therapy. And we use this technique to unlock the hold that the beliefs have on the client. And then we create new beliefs. So for her, what she wanted to believe is that relationships are reliable, that I can rely on somebody to respect me, to support me, to love me, to be kind to me, to be there for me. And the way we do that is through various techniques. But the most powerful that I find when I'm working one-on-one with clients is inner child work. We go back and we make the inner child feel safe, because essentially it's that fear in the inner child that's driving us to keep the behaviors and the patterns as they were. So we create safety for the inner child. But we can use things like affirmations. For example, with my own belief that life's tough, I decided I don't want to go through the rest of my life believing that life's tough. And I recreated that within myself. And the belief that I chose instead is life is really good to me. So now I can see these opportunities. I can be open to receiving them, just like my client was able to go back into her relationship with a new perspective, one in which she could receive the respect, the love, the kindness, the compassion that her partner was offering her, and really believe that it was possible from a place of safety. In addition, when it comes to breaking these habits, these beliefs, we use that bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. We start a daily breathing practice. Now, it can be something as simple as inhaling for a count of 4 through your nose and exhaling for a count of 4 through your nose for a minimum of 3 minutes every day. This is a way for you to connect to your unconscious every single day, to start building that bridge that allows you to make the connections and foster lasting change. And the second technique that I use is a technique of altered state breathing. And this directly accesses the unconscious mind and allows for that transformation to take place. Using these two techniques, along with timeline therapy, we're able to take you from this unconscious patterning and behavior and into a conscious creation of a life that you really love, which is essentially what all of us really want. So I have to ask myself, is life really tough? Or is life really good to me? Are relationships unreliable? Or can I be in a reliable relationship? Once we start to foster this curiosity, we start to open up the possibility of creating change, of creating a life that we really, really love. I hope you found this interesting. And if there's one thing you can take away that you can start doing immediately on your own, it's that daily breathwork practice.